Why is the mainstream media dying? What's happening?
Oh, look, it's a very long answer, really, but it's the easiest way I can explain the way I see this happening is once upon a time, if you're a public relations person, so I'll put it that way, right? And you were trying to get a story about, I don't know, pens and paper out there. There was a newspaper, there were 4 or 5 TV networks, 2 radio networks, and that was it. And you were competing for that space, right, to get your story across. Right? So very, very limited space, very controlled space. Now it's the total reverse. There is so much space out there that it's almost impossible to get heard. So you can scream your head off on YouTube, on Facebook, on anywhere you like, right? But getting people to hear you is the challenge. And so it's gone that way. It's actually gone out to the point where this, what we call mainstream, I just call old school media, right, it's old school, right? So it's losing its relevance. And because everybody can get information at their fingertips by literally clicking on a mouse, right? And this is also where the disinformation things become so bloody easy, because you can just plant disinformation out there. Bad news travels better than good news. Put it out there, it'll start to move around your social media channels. So there's a relevance argument going on in old school media, and it will come down to, I suspect, an on-demand process. Sitting down and turning on the TV at 7 o'clock because I want to watch the ABC News, people's brains just don't work like that anymore. They pick one of these up and they look
exactly
to find out what's going on. And that's where they're getting a lot of their information. And you've got to understand that thing is one of the most powerful communications tools ever built. Like, there's been nothing like it in history. The amount of information you can get off one of these phones is just extraordinary. I mean, it's Star Wars stuff. So people don't understand how much technology has reached into that space and taken away the relevance of it. So do I need to pick up a paper in the morning to read it right before I go to work, which is what I always used to do. Read the paper before you do anything so you know what's going on. It'll come to me on demand. I'll get it as updates. It'll just feed through. So old school media is struggling for traction out there because it's not very convenient anymore.
I want to make an observation, and I just want to get your take on it. Now, I'm an ex-copper, as you know, and I looked at the mainstream media's response to the George Floyd death and the Black Lives Matter movement. Now, it's about creating a narrative. There is always a narrative. It's not just about telling a story, reporting a story. There is always a narrative behind that. Now, the narrative that was propagated here, or overseas, and including here in Australia, was that the police are out to murder Black people, and the police inherently target and pick on Indigenous Australians, and the deaths in custody is evidence of that. The police are an inherently racist organisation. There is no way I would have joined something that was akin to the Gestapo or the SS. And that's kind of how things were portrayed. So to me, that was just not true. It was just a false narrative. In fact, it was a distortion so much as it became a lie, and an easily disprovable lie, because all you had to do was get on the, use an obscure source like Google and get onto these.
Nobody's ever heard of it.
No one's ever heard of it. And this other equally obscure institution called the Australian Bureau of Statistics, to find out that it was an easily disprovable lie. And I'll put the stats up during the interview, it's just the source and the stats. Now, but the mainstream media, almost to a person, with a couple of very notable and brave exceptions, with upholding and validating this false narrative. I sort of think that's linked to the death of the mainstream media, me personally. I'm just curious as to what you think.
Yeah, look, it's a complicated one. When you say narrative, there is a blurry line between news and comment and sort of current affairs entertainment these days. The line is very blurry. And I can remember Gerald Stone, who was the first producer of 60 Minutes. I think that's right. And he was talking to the Adelaide Press Club. This is a long time ago, right? When 60 Minutes had first appeared. And all of these journalists fanging in, but this isn't journalism, this is blah, blah, blah. And he virtually stood there and just went, I don't know what you're all getting so upset about. It's entertainment. Why do you think it's anything else? right? And that's pretty much what he said, or words to that effect. Please don't, it's a long time ago, but that's effectively what he's done, right? And you go, okay, so this is where it's all going. So when you talk about narrative, news and purist news has its own little category under the Act, and it has specific ways that it behaves, right, or it's meant to behave. Now, I didn't see, personally, a narrative in mainstream news. I saw stuff coming out in all the other places about how big is this problem and are these protests justified, and therefore the narrative that you're talking about, right? And I certainly saw it appear, but I also saw a lot of holders, effectively what people were doing was covering protests. Here's the protest, here's all the shit that's going on, that sort of stuff. Was there a narrative there? Yes, there was I would say it wasn't in the news cycle. It depends on your definition of news. And so once again, we come back one. So this is another story from Iraq. When we were sitting in Iraq, one of the things I did there was I watched everything, right? So local TV, BBC, blah, 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 you name it, right? On what anybody was saying about Iraq at any given point in time. The Americans hated Al Jazeera. If you remember the tank, right? Okay, yeah, that was a pretty clear get up here, right? Al Jazeera, and every time I watched, because I could see the intel reports coming in on certain incidents around us, Al Jazeera was spot on the dot every single time, right? Almost faultless with their numbers and their everything else, and blah, blah, blah. But the way Western media interpreted Al Jazeera, the Americans weren't going to let them into America because they were clearly pro-terrorist, right? Even though they were blindingly accurate. So where I'm going with this is there is a thing of opinion that goes across the top of all these things all the time, and I'm not quite sure where and how it always creeps in. Is there a narrative? It's become more and more a feature. Yes. So there is what's the word I'm looking for? There's a grab you need because media's relevance that we were talking about before.
Yep.
So the harder you go in and the more dramatic you can make it, the more likely you are to get a viewer or a reader or whatever. Right?
Yeah. Okay.
So that is undoubtedly becoming part of the process. There's no question of it. And in fact, I've seen blatant examples of it in a couple of cases where I've even complained to news directors about the behaviour of certain people and nothing ever gets done. So hence I'm not a journo anymore. So,
but it kind of links in, like you divorce facts from a narrative, as you're pointing out with that Al Jazeera thing. You kind of like, I don't know, like, are you getting into the stage where you're distorting what's happening? And I think a really good example of something else you've done is the Reporting Islam project. I'm going to come out and declare an interest, I suppose. I think that was magnificent work. I've got a lot of very good Muslim friends here. I have a lot to do with the Islamic community. I'm friends with the local Imam and an excellent local Imam who unfortunately had to go to Western Australia over there. This is close to my heart. But there was you did the Reporting Islam project, which was fundamentally a project around, look, how are we going to tell a story? So, for example, the Link Cafe siege or these bombings are happening without creating a narrative that all Muslims are terrorists. How are we going to do that? So that's a kind of de facto recognition that it's like, okay, we've got to be careful. We've got to report things. We've got to be accurate, but we've got to not feed into a false narrative. And then you've got to balance that stuff with the Christchurch massacre. So how are we going to tell that story without feeding into the narrative that Australian society is fundamentally, to its core, anti-Islamic and a racist place that hates people from the Middle East? That's got to be tough, and that's something that I've always felt a degree of sympathy with for the media. Yeah, look,
it's to come back to where we were before, and then we're heading towards the Reporting Islam. One of the things that's become very clear to me since really leaving the media, probably clearer than when I was a journo for some unknown reason. Maybe my brain just works better now. I've got rid of the lump. Is facts alone won't tell a story. People won't stick to a set of facts, right? So if you just go up and ram facts down people's throat, it doesn't achieve anything. You're not communicating. People just they turn off. It's got to be it's got to be in the context of a story that they can engage with to understand why they're listening to these facts. I'm sure there are people who go out and do homework because they're looking for a fact. That's very different to taking it from somebody like you or me. I can just sit there and go, oh, the numbers are, what have you communicated? Probably bugger all. Yep. So narrative or storytelling is an inherent part of journalism in a sense, in the way you structure, okay? So when we did the Reporting Islam thing, the Reporting Islam project was, and I got approached to do this because of my experience in Iraq and because of the long story, I knew the people involved. But it was really to go into newsrooms and make people think and go, what do you actually know that you think you know? Yeah. Right? And work them. So what we did was we do a session where we had, a specialist who would just do a little talk about, this is the facts about Islam as opposed to what you think I'm thinking. And then it was up to me then to go as the journo who's run lots of newsrooms and everything else, was then to start running scenarios and start messing with their heads, right? And to get them to think about things as we went, and to find, where there were inherent biases and where there were facts that were simply missing, and why don't you know the local imam? Why haven't you ever approached him, right? Stuff like that. And it was really a project to get people to think. Simple stuff like, discerning between Muslims and Sikhs. Most people don't know. Most people can't tell the difference. I mean, there were Sikhs getting attacked in the US, it's just, so all this sort of stuff going on. So it's just, come on, guys, pull away and have a think, because your brain's been filled with whatever it's been filled with, right? And I can sit here and probably say, and if you had religious studies at school, they probably helped. That sort of stuff, and it's probably in their heads, and you got to get out of there. I mean, I've had journo flash moments where I've been writing stuff, and you sit there and you go, "Oh God, I've got it all wrong. Oh God," and the whole realization goes over you. You just go, "Oh, I completely missed it," and you go back and you have to rethink the whole thing, right? And so it's really just to create that moment in people's heads, and it seemed to work.
Yeah, and look, that's good on you, because I think this is part of what's fundamentally human psychology. We live in narratives. Human beings, we're storytelling creatures, but we don't just tell stories. We actually live in and create a story. So it's the story of your own life, like who you are, where you're going, what you're doing. You know what I mean? This narrative, the way that we approach narrative is so important. Like you said, facts by themselves mean nothing. They kind of don't mean anything unless you put them in the context of where you are, who you are, what you're doing, what your aims are. So if you're seeking a whole bunch of facts to validate a pre-existing bias that you have in your head, well, you're falling. You know what I mean? And you say to yourself that you're not lying. Like, that happened. How can you deny that? Whereas if you don't kind of, if you're not seeking sort of stuff, there was this great conversation, and I'll put it in the hyperlinks. There's a brilliant young academic in America called Colin Hughes. He's brilliant. And just recently he interviewed, and he's an African-American chap, and he interviewed an African-American journalist who is like, just for this, American society is racist. Like, the whole system is just against whole system is just against African-American people. And Hughes, who clearly has a degree of ambivalence, like when he talks about it, he goes, well, yeah, yes, these things exist, and yes, like he's not Thomas Sowell, who's just out there going, it's kind of codswallop. Sowell is very dismissive. Like you see some really credible African-American academics who are fundamentally just so dismissive of this narrative. You can tell that Hughes entertains it. And he even said, and he was brilliant about it, he phrased it so well. He said, look, I've researched this. I'm kind of a bit of an expert in this area, and the facts just don't fit the narrative that you're portraying. Like, how do you feel about that? What are we going to do about this when the facts don't fit the narrative that you're telling, or you're cherry picking things to again, you can't say that this murder, that copper didn't kneel on George Floyd's head. You can't say that didn't happen. Incidentally, and I don't want to go too much on this, but in all the court stuff, it was never led anywhere that happened because of his colour. Like, there was some terrible policing, and that, it's because the guy's a badly trained thug, I would suggest is why it happened. But it has nothing to do with the fact that he had melanin in his skin. And Hughes beautifully puts this across. So it really concerns me, because these narratives that are in our society, they're kind of tearing us apart. But we really are at a genuine crossroads in history where I don't trust, when I say the mainstream media, I don't mean every journalist out there. There are, and okay, Peter, I'm talking about, I trust you, Tom, I trust you, Charlie, I trust you, all the journalists who I know are going to be watching this, Janelle, I know, I know and trust all of you guys. But the ABC is ironically a source, and we're the most trusted, kind of like, well, are you? The SBS I find laughable, and NITV, oh my God, but the narrative that those guys portray, I slap my head at the distortions. Again, they're kind of cherry picking. That you can't say that this particular story that you're telling isn't true, but is the narrative true? And the answer in my head is not.
No, I was just going to say, because part of the narrative, right, and this is the thing that people forget, when you're talking about relevance of old school media, they will pick a yarn that they know is going to get a reaction because they want to be relevant, right? And I've seen it happen 100 times, and just go, that's not news. What's this crap? And so, and there is that goes on, and so that's the cherry picking you're talking about to some degree. If they know they're going to get a reaction out of it, they'll do it. I mean, we're at a turning point, not just with media, we're at a turning point with politics. We're at a turning point with lots of things.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of politicians running around out there at the moment, dropping stuff on Twitter designed to get an angry reaction.
Exactly.
That's what it's designed to. And they're out there feeding that machine. So we've reached a turning point for a lot of things, I suspect. So not just media, but I think it's in terms of politics, certainly in communications, we have reached a very interesting juncture. And what's going to fall out of this pandemic, with all the disinformation and the crap flying around out there, is going to be a lot of people are going to go back and have a very, very long, hard look at how this is working. So it will be very interesting to see.
One of the other interviews that I've had is Dr. Paul Boddington. Excellent interview. Have a look at it, and I'll put the hyperlink in there. She's an expert, an international expert on artificial intelligence and big tech generally. So she's given the stuff that she writes has influenced legislation in the United Kingdom, and she's an expert who gives information to international bodies. She's amazing. And one of the things that she throws in is the technological side of things. So it's not just this narrative, that narratives can be like viruses in your head that you kind of can't get rid of. Like, people think Jung said that people think that they have ideas. That's not what happens. Ideas have people. And it's kind of like they possess you. An idea can possess a person, which I think is brilliant. When you link that with something that Dr. Boddington said, she goes, look, Matt, and I'm paraphrasing here, but I'm quite sure I'm getting it right. She says, it's kind of comparable. What is happening now with technology is comparable to big tobacco, when they found out that tobacco is something that it makes you addictive, that people get addicted to, and it's going to kill you. But they were still like, some 4 out of 5 doctors recommend, Laramie cigarettes. They, with a smoke, picture of a guy with a stethoscope around him. And they're still just telling those lies. You know what I mean? And that's a lie. Like, those guys were lying their asses off. She said, big tech knows now and has known for some time that they're actively biohacking into human psychology to get them to become addicted to tech. Like, that's happening. And so there's the circuits in your brain that you can tick that are related to gambling. So if you get a dopamine hit from looking at a news article that, makes you feel good about yourself, or something else like this, and it's linked with the actual technology itself, like it's flashing in a certain way, it's doing all these sorts of, that's literally biohacking in. She said, I think there is going to be a case in the future, and I'm quoting almost word for word, that this will be viewed as some sort of crime against humanity, perhaps comparable to this idea that we're selling tobacco to minors and 4 out of 5, that is going to happen in the future, in very near. So when you link those two things with this idea of a narrative that possesses people, and that we're looking that journalists, and again, they're not bad people, they're kind of doing their job. They're looking for a narrative that is going to possess a person, because there is this shouting crowd of narratives. And then you link that with tech. It's like, dude, where is this going? That is super sinister. There's something kind of like going on. And I think people can feel it.
Oh, and look, there are things that are just going out of date. I mean, you've got to think about this, and I know this is a really good dinner conversation to get everybody angry. Think about democracy, right? The Westminster system. What it was you rode in on your horse from your district, clock, for 3 weeks, to sit in Parliament House, argue on behalf of your local constituents, and then back on your horse, back to your local constituents to talk, right? It was you were the representative of that group. So the reason you all sat in a room together is because that was the only way you could actually do anything, because there was no bloody internet, there was nothing else. We don't need any of it anymore. So you don't actually have to all sit in a room and yell at each other anymore. You can do it over Zoom. You can do it anywhere you like. Right? The original construct is now going out of date. The original construct of old school news, which was I, as a person, run around and do all your research for you, right, to bring it all to you. I will get access to that politician. I will get access to that lobbyist. I will get access to that scientist. I will get access, and I will bring it all to you, nicely packaged so that you can watch it. Why do you need it anymore?
Yeah.
You just click on Google.
Yeah, and it's amazing. Like, guys like me can ring up, and I'm not a journalist. I'm not a journalist bootlace. And I contact a woman on the other side of the world who's an internationally recognized expert on artificial intelligence and a compelling speaker. Although she talks really fast, like her brain works really, really quickly. So she talks really fast. I actually had to get her to slow down talking to her. I can go direct to the source and bring her expertise to the people of Cairns and North Queensland. Yeah, you're spot on. And we don't need someone to formulate it into a narrative, into a compelling narrative, or at least a contextual framework for people to understand the facts. This long form conversation, you wouldn't think it would resonate with people, but it is. People actually like long form discussions where you discuss complex issues with nuance, that you haven't got your snap grab narratives. People are going beyond that. And what it comes right down to is people aren't stupid. I think one of the reasons that Northern Vibe is going okay for a Gumby from North Queensland who just kind of chats to people is I genuinely, bottom of my heart, do not think that my listeners are stupid. I don't think they need me to frame anything for them. I don't think they need me to say, you need to think this. I don't think they need me to form a narrative or fit it in. I think what people want to hear is, how about this? How about this? And let's kind of discuss it and get a nuanced discussion. People seem to be resonating. They like it, so that's.
I'm with you. I mean, if you treat people like they're stupid, then you're the dumb one. So it's, you've got to put stuff out there so people can hear ideas. I reckon people are starved for genuine information. I reckon they're starved for it. There's information everywhere over the internet, but it's so bloody hard to find the right stuff. So